I will never get over the grief of not being able to have children. And it's one of the things that cancer robbed me of. And I wasn't expecting it at the time. And I didn't expect it to last this long. But it's something I feel I need to talk about because we don't talk about it a lot. More and more young women are being diagnosed with cancer, not just breast, and fertility is affected. And I'm a breast surgeon. I've had breast cancer 3 times. I didn't even think to think about my own fertility until I was in the consultation room. And it's funny. I got married late. Well, not late. Yes, late. I was 36. I'd been single for 10 years before that. I'd assumed that I'd be single for the rest of my life. I'd got used to going out to restaurants and going on holiday by myself. I'd accepted that I wasn't going to have children. I didn't really think I wanted them. I had 2 cats from a rescue shelter. I was the single crazy cat lady. Although it's funny, when I first started medical school, I was going to be Wales's first female trauma surgeon, married with 3 kids at the age of 27. I thought it was easy. That was what I was going to do. Not a chance. Surgical training was really, really, really hard. And I was single. I used to joke with a friend. She was a head and neck surgeon. Incredible, incredible woman. Hands of just art. I was going to have twins in exchange for a Gucci handbag, and I'd give her the twins. And this was the pact we made when we was 30. I wanted children, I thought, but I was scared because I'd been bullied really badly as a child when I was 7, and then again when I was 13. And I found it really hard. And I could not imagine having a child that might have to go through that pain. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't know what to do. And that fear of them going through what I went through was kind of stopping me thinking, I know I want children. But I kind of assumed that I wouldn't. And then I got married to a wonderful man. He was my husband. He was my boss. He asked me out the day I stopped working for him. And everyone knew we were going to date before we did. And my first year of married life was spent working 2.5 hours away, living with his in-laws. I did a breast cancer fellowship at the Royal Marsden in London, and I go back and forth every weekend. Not ideal for the first year of married life. And when I was 40, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I knew what it was when I saw the ultrasound. I've talked about it before in another film. It was a shock. And 2 weeks later, I was in the oncologist's room discussing chemotherapy. I had a big cancer. They were going to give me chemo first to shrink it down. And we were going through the side effects of chemotherapy. Losing your hair. Now I get bad migraines. I wasn't going to cold cap because they can make them worse. Diarrhea, constipation, fertility. And she said, do you have children? And I said, no. Do you want children? I kind of looked at my husband and said, we're not sure. And she said, look, your cancer's big and I don't want to run the risk of chemo. I don't want to run the risk of IVF. Making your cancer grow because your cancer is really big. So I don't think it's wise. So we'll move on. And it was like, oh, in 30 seconds during the rundown of chemo side effects, my husband and I had publicly agreed that we were never going to have children. And the oncologist, I'd worked with her as a junior doctor in the hospital. My husband was a colleague, and it was just, oh. And I walked out of the room when she'd finished dealing with all the information running around your head of chemotherapy, of how bad it is and how scared I was and what's going to happen. But it was this, I'm never going to be a mum. And I knew then, at that moment, that I really, really, really wanted to be a mother. And that decision had been taken from me by cancer, by breast cancer, the one illness I had spent my life training to treat. And we'd had to make that decision publicly in split seconds. And yes, there wasn't really a choice. You know, I was going to do what the doctor said, but it was really hard. And my surgeon hadn't told me to think about fertility. And I get that. I forgot to tell my patients, my young women, to think about fertility before they go to see the oncologist, because there's so much going through your head. As a doctor, there's so much to cover. But I do wonder whether I did all my young women a disservice by telling them not to think about it. And I guess when you're younger, in your 20s and 30s, there are things we can do during chemo. We can give you injections of something called Zoladex that switches off your ovaries and protects them. because what chemo does is it damages fast-growing cells. Here's me going into Dr. Liz mode. And because your ovaries are producing eggs, they're fast-growing, chemo can stop them. And the older you are, the closer you are to the menopause, the less likely your ovaries are to recover. So chemotherapy puts you into a permanent menopause, which is what happened to me. In your 20s and 30s, we give you a drug that stops your ovaries working during chemo. So they're not affected because they're not actively growing. And a lot of women can become pregnant afterwards. Or there are options to freeze your eggs and do all sorts of stuff depending on where you are. It's complicated about money and what's available to you. But because I was 40, I didn't think it was worth the risk. And I didn't bother trying to save the ovaries during chemo because I'd accepted I wasn't going to have them. And fuck me. It's really bloody hard. I didn't realize how much this would hurt. I really didn't. And my husband has a wonderful daughter who's 10 years younger than me from his first marriage, and she now has 2 children. So I'm a step granny, but they call me bonus granny. I don't want to be a step granny in my 40s. That's just weird. I feel like a wicked witch from some fairy tale. But in Scandinavia, they call step parents bonus parents because you're extras. I'm BG. And my brother has a son. So my nephew, he's 11 or 12. And my husband's got lots of brothers and sisters who all have children. So I am in an extended in-law family with a lot of children around me. But it's not the same. There's just, I see a baby and I see the way a baby looks at their mum. And there's something about that look, that bond, that I miss. I hate knowing I'm never going to experience that feeling of having this child who depends on you, who loves you, who needs you. And I have a Cocker Spaniel and I love Hunter and he loves me, but it's not quite the same. That just, and being able to teach them. My mum taught me so much. I thought I'd have a girl and or a boy. Isn't that terrible? I'd have a child and I could teach them how to bake and how to knit and how to ride a bike and how to garden and how to find the birds and all the stuff that you imagine and all the crafts at Christmas and birthdays. And now I hate, well, no, I don't hate. I find Christmas and Easter really hard because when you don't have children, it doesn't mean as much. And all the knitting that I can't do for my own child. And yes, I knit for all my nieces and nephews and it's lovely, but they're not mine. And it's different. And I can be a great aunt and I can do all the things with them, but it's just, they're not mine. And it's so much harder when the decision isn't yours, when it's made for you, when there is no choice. Because if I hadn't have got cancer, my husband and I probably never would have had children. Dermot's 10 years older than me. I didn't want to be the geriatric parent at the school gate. We quite like our very nice life. It's just the 2 of us. Do we have time? And how do I work as a consultant surgeon and have a new baby? And how would that work? And I'd be paying someone to look after the child with nannies and creches and childminders, or so I go to work as a surgeon, or do I give it my job to have a baby? All these things are running through my head and it probably never would have happened and I'd have been completely fine. But when it's not your decision to make, it hurts. And oh God, I have to turn off Facebook when it's World Book Day and all these pictures of children doing all these lovely things, and it's really upsetting. So my mum, I'll put a picture in. There's a lovely company up in Scotland called Borough Bears, and my mum she kept all the knitted baby grow she'd made, and there's this colourful crocheted knitted baby grow that she'd made for me when she was pregnant with me, and she'd kept it, and she'd kept one of her maternity tops that she'd knitted so I could wear it when I had a baby. And I knew I was never going to be able to give her a grandchild, so Borough Bears turned that baby grow into a teddy bear. I called Elizabeth and I gave it to my mum, and when she died I had one of her cardigans turned into a teddy bear as well, so I kind of have my little baby. But it's really hard, and we don't talk about this. We don't talk about the grief of losing your fertility. And it's not just me who hasn't had children. There are women who've had 2 or 3 children who dreamt of having a larger family and they can't continue. And it's not all right to say, well, they're lucky they've got two. That's not luck. That's what they planned for. That's what they wanted. They are allowed to grieve the loss of that next child that they can't have. And I think it's hard for my husband to understand because he has a child. And he'd always said he finds pregnant women sexy and he'd love to see me pregnant and he'd love to have a child with me and do it with the money and experience that he now has as an adult, not as a medical student. And those dreams are gone. And I'm an orphan now. Mum and dad have died and there's no one to give my things to. I've got a lot of stuff that I've carried around as I've moved all over the UK training, and it's now up in boxes in my loft. And it's like, why am I keeping all this stuff? Why am I keeping all my childhood memories? Because there's no one to give them to. I don't have a child to show the photos of me at university or the books I used to keep. They don't mean anything to anybody. And so I'm heartlessly getting rid of them, thinking, fuck it, what's the point? I have beautiful jewellery and it'll go to my husband's family because I don't have anyone to pass it on to. And it's just this, when I die, my life stops with me. And yes, it may have been different if I'd never had children naturally, but it's just, you think about these things. You think, well, I think how life is different. And someone asked me, why didn't you adopt? You know, two surgeons working, you could easily adopt, you could foster, you could, make the life of some child incredible. And we thought long and hard about that. We did. But, so my voice is going really squeaky. I was 40. My cancer was 13 centimeters. It had spread to 2 or 3 of my lymph nodes. There was high risk of it coming back. I've had 2 local recurrences. I did not want to bring a young child into our marriage and then for me to be dead 4 years later, and my husband is now raising a child on his own in his 60s. I didn't think that was fair. That fear of the unknown and what might happen to me, I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And we're not set up for fostering, and the urge wasn't strong enough to take a child that nobody wants to look after them. And I feel a bit guilty about that, but I think it's okay to say that. That's not what I wanted for me. You kind of want it to be perfect, and there's no guarantees, and my life's definitely not been perfect. But I now think I'd have been a really good mum. I'd had a really strong bond with that child, and I would have looked after it and protected it, and there's nowhere for that love to go. Well, there is. My dog and my husband and all my nieces and nephews, but it is different. And it's just so hard. It really, really is. And I had no idea just how big the impact of losing your fertility would be. Because I never was part of that discussion. I would warn women that they'll have to talk about fertility when they go to see the oncologist. I'd never been on the receiving end of that information, of having to make that decision so quickly, where you're just going, yes, 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 I'm terrified. Oh, chemo, okay, fine. And it hurts. It really, really hurts. And I'd love to know what you've thought thinking about this. Have you been in the same position? What do you think hearing me? It's hard when you want a baby. And I think that's why I spend my life looking after all the wild animals and all the wild birds and all the wild hedgehogs, because it's giving me someone to love. The birds come to my garden and they want me, and I can feed them, and they're all my babies. And I think that's kind of giving me that maternal bond. And I'll be heartbroken when Hunter dies. But it's just that decision. It's funny, reminding myself back when I was working in the Marsden, my first year of married life, I had baby coaching. I read a lot of books about women in their late 30s and 40s, because it can be dangerous to have a child when you're that old. There are a lot of risks to the mother's health, as well as the child's health. And how do you know whether you really want a child? And I had coaching, because that sounds awful, to help me make the decision, because I was so worried about financial, practical decisions of having a child in my 40s. I couldn't listen to what my heart was telling me. I couldn't get through to what I imagine, take everything else away, all the other decisions and things to worry about. What does Liz the newly married surgeon want, and I couldn't get there. And I read books about women who'd had babies at 43, and I'd read books about women who were childless, and we still judge women that don't have babies. And then I read somewhere they're thinking of putting a tax on motherless women because we're not contributing to society. I mean, for fuck's sake, so many women can't have children for medical reasons, for religious. There's so much. It's not a thing that you choose. Oh my God, there are women who desperately want children and can't get pregnant. This is men being ridiculous. But back at that time, I was too scared to make a decision because what if I made the wrong one? And I think it's because I didn't have to at that time. I was living away from home. I thought I'd have another couple of years and just see what happened. And did I leave it too late? Should I have had a child earlier as a new consultant? I don't know. It didn't happen. And now it never will. And I just felt this is something we need to talk about. The pain, the grief of infertility. That will hit me like a knife every time I see a cute baby smile and wrap their hand around mum's little finger, or walk for the first time. And it's just, I'm never going to experience that. It's one more thing that cancer has robbed me of. Life really isn't fair at times. I'd love to know what you think. And if there's any other aspects of my life as a surgeon and a cancer patient that you'd like me to talk about, let me know. Because it's actually quite therapeutic chatting about all of this. And the usual, remember to subscribe and like and comment so you don't miss my next videos. And thank you for taking the time to watch.